Hi there, I hope you're having a good day. Today I'm going to be showing you the fundamentals of programming within Unity using C# and Visual Studio. First off, I am assuming you know nothing about programming and you want to learn how to program video games. This video will teach you the very basic concepts that you will need going forward, but you won't be able to make a game just from watching this video, unless it's a text-based adventure that is based completely within the console. On screen now there should be timestamps that will direct you to each different section of the video depending on what you're looking for. The YouTube chapters feature should also be active too, so that nicely shows you how it's all split up in the bar at the bottom of the screen. So what is a programming language? A programming language is what you use to tell a computer what you want it to do. Typically you will write code using a programming language within an integrated development environment, or IDE. This IDE then takes your code and compiles it into the ones and zeros that the computer understands. There are a lot of programming languages out there. In the case of this video, I'm going to be using C# because that is the native programming language for Unity. So I'm going to write code in the language C# using Visual Studio 2022 and compiling it for the Unity engine. But what is an engine? Well, it is what you're going to build games in. You could go about building your own engine, but this is a lot of work and I wouldn't recommend it when there are free alternatives, because trust me, engines take a lot of mathematical and programming know-how to create. So we have Unity and our IDE installed, and we have opened a fresh project within Unity. We aren't going to talk much about the Unity interface. We are just going to focus on these four areas: the inspector, the console, the project window, and our scene view. Right click in the project window and click Create C# Script. You will be prompted to name it right away, and if you click off then it will set the name not only of your file but of the class as well. We are going to be using the script to print Hello World into the console, which is a standard exercise used when getting started with programming. So let's just name the script Display Hello World with no spaces. You should also use capital letters for the start of each word. If Visual Studio or your IDE isn't automatically opening when you double click the script, click Edit, Preferences, External Tools, and set the external script editor to your IDE. When your IDE loads, you should see something similar to this, the Unity default code block. This is what Unity creates for you. The top three lines are libraries that this specific class is using, followed by this declaration, which also has the name of the class. The class name needs to match up with the file name. MonoBehavior is a Unity class that grants the functionality of Unity. Essentially, these two dots say we are inheriting from the MonoBehavior class so we can access the functionality within it. MonoBehavior is a class that has been written for us already, and you can look into the Unity documentation to see more about it. The text in green after the two slashes are comments and are purely there just for people. The compiler and the computer will completely ignore these lines. Then we have these two lines. These are methods that were created and we are inheriting from MonoBehavior. All code within the start curly braces will be ran before the first frame of the game, and all the code and update will be called every frame. So what is a class? A class is a blueprint of a functionality that when given to an object, that object can use that functionality. Classes will contain variables, which is data you want to store or use, and methods that grant functionality to the object. If we return to the Unity editor, we are going to need an object to place our script on. On the toolbar you can create a new object, and I am just going to create a cube. You can go to the project window and drag our class onto the object, or use the Add Component button in the inspector. If we look in the inspector window, we can see our class, or script, has been added as a component to this specific cube. More on objects in a little bit. Let's start writing some actual code. Firstly, we are going to write a statement. If you remember what I said before, we are just making a script that prints Hello World to the console. We do this by calling on the debug class, followed with a dot to access debug's methods. We want to use log, as this prints whatever we put into the rounded brackets to the console. Now, within the rounded brackets, we write Hello World with quotation marks because it's a string, but we'll get more into what strings are in a little bit. Finally, we end our statement with a semicolon. Always remember the semicolon. Save the file and go back to Unity. Providing that you added the class to an object in your world, you should be able to just hit the play button up here and be able to view your console down here as it's displaying Hello World. Now, it is very important that the capital letters are in the correct place. The compiler will complain if they aren't written exactly as they were created. Keep this in mind because everything outside of comments and things inside quotation marks is case sensitive. Okay, let's quickly go over objects. Objects within the confines of Unity refers to anything within your game world. Lights, cubes, NPCs, buildings, and even empty space can be an object. The classes you give your objects are what determine what they are. Take this cube for example. It has these components, and in each one is a class that has been written. I'm not going to go into detail about these classes in this video, but I just want you to remember that objects in this context are anything in your game world. Also, if you do want to learn more about these classes, the Unity documentation tells you everything about them and it will be linked in the description. Although, if you are just a beginner, some of it might not make sense. Just stick with it and you'll get it in the end. So, you've heard me use the term method a few times, but what is it? It's essentially a command that you or someone else has written in your code. To declare a method, find some space within the class's curly braces, but outside of any other methods, so outside of the start or update method. If it's public, any other class that knows about this class will be able to use the method. If it's private, only this class can use the method. This is usually followed by a return type. It essentially means what kind of data you're going to be pulling out of the method. Don't worry about data types just yet, we'll get into it in the next section. Because we aren't returning any data from this and we just want the code to run, we set the return type to void, meaning no return type. If you were returning some form of data, you would need to do that at some point in the method using the return keyword. Now, we name our method. It's best to name it after what its function is, so I'm going to name it print hello world. Methods must end with those rounded brackets, which would contain any parameters or variables that we want to give the method to use, although keeping it nice and simple now, we're just going to leave it empty. Finally, we add curly braces to signify the start and end of our method. With that, we have created a method. Now we're going to move our statement to display hello world into this method by putting it inside the curly braces. In place of our original statement, we're going to use the method's name or its signature. This has to be identical to how it was created or it won't work. Remember, everything is case sensitive. This has the exact same functionality as before, displaying hello world, but you definitely want to get used to splitting your class's functionalities into their own methods, because this not only makes it a lot easier for you to read and keep track of, it also allows you to make changes a lot easier. And if you ever want to repeat some code or repeat a bit of functionality, all you have to do is put the method name there. So now onto data types and variables. Variables are used when you want to store some kind of data. In a game, this could literally be the player's health or their appearance. It could be their position in the world. Everything stored in variables. Firstly, where we place the variable matters. If we place it outside of our method, it is going to be class-wide and can be used by any of our other methods. If we place it inside a method, it will typically only be used by that method. Now, to make sure that we run the game efficiently and have all the functionality that we want to make sure that we're using the correct data type to store our data in. The main primitive data types that you'll use are booleans, or bool, which is a simple true or false 0 or 1 data type, integers, also known as int, which are used for whole numbers, floats, which are used for decimal places and require you to put an F after the number to tell the compiler that it is not the other data type named for decimals, known as double. Double is a lot more memory intensive and stores a lot more data, although floats is usually what is used within Unity. Strings are used when we want to store text, although strings are actually an array or collection of chars, which are a data type that store single characters in. So, let's declare our integer. We can declare if this is public or private in the same way as methods. If we don't declare it as public or private, it will be treated as private by default. Now, if this variable is public, we'd be able to access it in the Unity editor. But because it's private, it doesn't show up. But if we want it to, we can type in serialized field in brackets, and this will cause it to appear in the editor. This is very helpful for when you want to change it on the fly, maybe when you're testing stuff out. We then declare this variable's data type, int, representing integer, and we give it a name. I'm going to call mine number because I have no creativity. This is then followed by an equal sign with the number you want to store within the variable. In my case, 1. So now we can add this variable to our hello world statement to print hello world 1. To do this, we simply add the variable to the end of our previous statement like so. If you want a little task here, pause the video and try and create a variable that contains our hello world string, and then only print hello world using variables. You type in string hello world text equals quotation hello world close quotation. And now we can replace our string with our hello world text variable. Now, you may notice in the console when you run this, you don't have a space between your hello world and your number. To fix this, you can either add a space at the end of your hello world variable, or add a space between the two variables. The space is a character, so you do need to use quotation marks. Variables can also be changed. They can increase, they can decrease, you can add them together, create a new variable that is the product of two variables. Just play around with them, have fun with them. Conditionals, or if-else statements, are ways that you can create a branching path in your code, where only certain code will run when a condition that you set as a programmer is met. Let's just quickly create an example if statement in its own method. First, we write the keyword if, followed by rounded brackets. Within these rounded brackets, we are going to put a condition. For example, let's use the integer variable we made before. So now we're going to need a comparison operator, less than, greater than, equal to. I'll put a table of the operators on screen now. So if number is less than, let's say, 10, then what? Well, let's run our print hello world method in there. We're going to put the if method into our update loop so it's checked every frame rather than at the start, because it will only be checked once at the start, and we want to be able to see this in real time if the if statement is working. We then hit save and go hit play on our Unity engine. Now as you can see, it's printing hello world repeatedly. If we go over to our object in the inspector window and look at the numbers variable, because we put the serialized field there, we can change this. We can change this to 10 or above and it will stop printing hello world because the condition isn't being met anymore. So now say you want to do something else if your condition is not true. This can be done by placing the keyword else followed by curly brackets after your if statement ends. So if the number is not less than 10, it's going to print world hello. Simple as that. Now finally we have the else if. You can use this to create another path that the code will head down. For example, if the number is 10 exactly, let's print the message super secret hello world. Essentially, you can create as many else ifs as you want, but make sure you lay out your conditions logically. These are all tested from top to bottom, so if one of your conditions is met, any other condition won't be tested, unless you start a new if statement. For example, if number less than 20 is followed by else if number less than 10, the else if will never be reached because any number under 10 is also under 20. You can also add multiple conditions to an if statement. You do this using an AND or an OR logical operator. AND simply means that all conditions have to be evaluated to true in order for it to run the code, and OR means that any of the conditions have to be true in order for the code to run. Finally, we are onto loops, of which there are 3. We have the while loop, the for loop, and the do while loop. Usually with loops, you have to create a variable that controls how many times the loop runs or its iterations. I am going to create a new variable outside of any methods, call it iter, and initialize it at 0. The while loop starts with the keyword while, followed with rounded brackets that will contain the conditions for the loop to keep going. In this case, while the iter variable is less than 10, we are going to then print the value that is stored in the iter variable using our debug.log, and then we are going to increase the iter variable by 1 using iter++, which is the same thing as saying iter equals iter plus 1. If you don't increase your iter variable, then the loop will never be exited and it will run forever and most likely crash your Unity. Typically, a while loop is used when you don't know how many times the loop needs to run. For loops are more contained and better used when it's not an unknown variable how many times you want to loop. To write this, we start with the keyword for, followed by rounded brackets, but this time we put more information inside the rounded brackets. First, we declare the iteration variable here. In this case, I'm going to call it I, initialize it as 0, and it is still an integer. Now, instead of ending it here, we place a semicolon, and then we type the condition for the loop to continue, same as before, I less than 10, semicolon. Finally, we say what will happen at the end. We increase I with I++ here, and we close off our rounded brackets. From here, we do the same thing of printing the value of the I variable. Finally, we have a do while loop. This is essentially a while loop, however the code within the loop will always be ran once without checking the condition. To write this, you put the keyword do, followed by your code within curly braces, and then the while comes at the end, structured the same way as previously. Now with this knowledge, let's use one of these loops to print hello world 10 times. I would suggest pausing the video to figure it out yourself if you want a challenge, and then you can see how I did it. I would suggest you comment out your if statement so you can actually see your loops working in the console, and then either write a method or write your loop within the start method. So I'm going to use a for loop and say for int I equals 0, semicolon I less than 10, semicolon I++. What this is saying is essentially the same as before. I is started at 0, and I want the loop to go on until I reaches 10. This is then followed by the debug.log statement within the curly braces, and hopefully I haven't missed a semicolon or anything. And with that, you now know the basic fundamentals of programming. I would suggest looking into arrays next if you want to continue learning how to program, or playing around with the Unity editor to get to grips with the editor itself. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, I would appreciate if you liked the video. If you have any questions, you can leave a comment below and I'll attempt to answer it to the best of my ability, or any feedback on the video would be greatly appreciated. If you want more videos to do with game development or programming, please subscribe to the channel, and I hope you have a good day. Thank you again for watching the video.